My brother found our sister, Alice, dead on the highway and held her for 20 minutes until paramedics arrived. But his grief turned into delusions, where he thought I was Alice. So, on Halloween, he drugged me and tried to force me into her princess costume for a dance recital while screaming that I was his dead sister until police took him away. Then he escaped the psych ward to dig up her grave because he thought she was calling him home. My brother Mikey found our dead little sister Alice on the side of the road. She had gotten into a car accident. He held her on the highway for 20 minutes before paramedics arrived, kept saying, "Wake up, Lala, please wake up." When we got home, Mikey walked around like a ghost. For weeks, he left her bedroom door open, her music still paused mid-song on her laptop. He asked me, "Mark, could you make her mac and cheese tonight, the way she liked it with extra butter?" While I cooked, Mikey scrolled through her Instagram on repeat in the living room. At first, it felt healing to keep her memory alive. Mom and Dad moved across the state to get away from it all, so it felt like my responsibility to keep him sane. But as summer turned to fall, Mikey's grief shifted into something unsettling. He started sleeping on her bedroom floor, telling me, "I can't leave her alone, Mark. What if she gets scared?" At 2 in the morning, I'd find him reading to her stuffed animals. I suggested grief counseling, and he actually went 3 times. But then I found the therapist's business card torn up in the trash. One October night when I came downstairs, he called me Alice in the dark kitchen. He immediately corrected himself. "Sorry, Mark. You just moved like her for a second." His correction sent chills down my spine because something in his voice had changed. I reminded him, "Mikey, I'm Mark, your brother," and he nodded without blinking. But he started slipping more. I tried convincing myself it was just his way of coping, but then he started buying me her favorite snacks. Pink nail polish kept appearing on my dresser, and he'd say, "Thought you might like it." When I said it was Alice's color, he'd whisper, "Exactly," with this distant smile. Then one morning, I woke up to find him organizing Alice's schedule on my calendar. When I asked what he was doing, he said through tears, "She has dance at 3, Mark. We can't let her miss it." That was the last time he used my real name. I knew something terrible was building, but nothing prepared me for Halloween morning. I woke up to him sitting on my bed with Alice's princess costume laid out, her favorite tiara polished, her ballet shoes cleaned. He smiled and said, "Time to get ready, princess. The recital is today." I sat up fast. "Mikey, what the hell is this?" Suddenly, I felt dizzy. When I tried to stand, he smiled. "You've been so tired lately, Alice, so I put something in your orange juice to help you rest." I sat there helpless as he pulled out her diary. He opened it saying, "Remember when you wrote about wanting to be a ballerina? Today's your big day." I shook my head hard. "Mikey, please, you're scaring me. I'm Mark." But his eyes looked through me. When I knocked the costume away, he grabbed my shoulders hard. "Why are you being difficult, Alice?" he said while I yelled, "Alice is dead. I'm Mark. I'm your brother." His face contorted and he screamed, "Stop lying. You're my sister. You've always been my sister." He tried forcing the tiara on my head while saying, "You promised you'd dance for Mom and Dad. You promised." I shoved him, "Get off me," and ran for the door. As I stumbled down the hall, he called, "Alice, come back. The recital starts soon." I barely locked myself in the bathroom before he caught up. He pounded on the door. "I spent weeks planning this. You can't miss your recital. Please, Alice. I know you're scared, but I'll be there." When I didn't respond, his tone turned desperate. "Alice, open up. Big brothers protect their sisters. Let me protect you." I wanted to call for help, but my phone was in my room. When I heard him getting tools, I screamed, "Help! Somebody help me!" Thank God our neighbor, Mrs. T, heard. Mikey had just removed the doorknob when she started knocking. "Mikey, is everything all right?" He called out sweetly. "Everything's fine, Mrs. T. Alice is just nervous about her recital." But Mrs. T yelled back, "Mikey, honey, Alice is gone. I'm calling for help." I sobbed, "I'm not Alice. I'm Mark." Mrs. T must have called 911 because soon there was pounding. "Police, open up." They found him trying to put the tutu on me while telling them, "Officers, she needs to get dressed. The recital is in an hour." Even in handcuffs, he cried, "Alice, tell them about your dance." One officer asked, "Son, what's your name?" And I choked out, "Mark, his brother." Mikey started thrashing. "He's confused. That's Alice, my baby sister." As they led him away, he kept yelling, "Alice, I'll film your recital. I promise." He was placed in psychiatric hold. I thought that was the end until 2 months later. The call came at 3 a.m. Mikey had escaped the facility and was arrested at the cemetery. They found him with a shovel, her grave half excavated, telling police, "She's been calling me. She wants to come home." The facility administrator's voice cracked through the phone. Dr. Brennan explained how Mikey had spent weeks befriending Sarah Peen, an orderly who'd lost her own sister 5 years ago. He'd convinced her that I was the one who needed help, that I was holding Alice captive in my grief. Sarah had given him her key card thinking she was helping reunite siblings. I drove to the county hospital in a daze. The waiting room fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while I filled out paperwork for his 72-hour psychiatric hold. My hands shook as I wrote his information, still processing how he'd manipulated his way out. The nurse behind the desk kept glancing at me with sympathy. My phone rang from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mikey's whisper made my blood freeze. He was calling from the nurse's station phone, speaking so quietly I had to strain to hear. He told me Alice was cold underground, that she needed her favorite blanket. The nurse caught him and took the phone away, but not before I realized he'd memorized my number from staff records. Dr. Brennan Brennan met me in the hospital cafeteria the next morning. She spread out incident reports across the sticky table. 3 different facility workers had filed complaints about feeling manipulated, but only after his escape. Mikey had shown them videos on a smuggled phone, edited clips of me yelling. What they didn't know was that I'd been yelling at Mikey, not Alice. He'd cropped the footage to make it look like abuse. Sarah Peen found me in the parking lot after her shift. She looked exhausted, guilt written across her face. She handed me photocopies of journal entries she'd found in Mikey's room. Page after page detailed his plans to rescue Alice from Mark's prison. The entries dated back months, showing careful observation of staff schedules and security protocols. The insurance coordinator pulled me aside that afternoon. Extended psychiatric care required family consent and would only cover 30 days without additional authorization. I faced a choice: pursue legal action against the facility for negligence, or focus on getting Mikey the long-term treatment he desperately needed. The lawsuit could take years. Mikey needed help now. I chose treatment. That evening, I called my parents for the 5th time that week. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. Their last email had been brief. They would only communicate monthly via email. No phone calls about Mikey. They couldn't handle hearing about his condition. Security footage arrived by courier 2 days later. The grainy video showed Mikey walking calmly through the facility exit at 2:15 a.m., wearing an orderly's uniform. Dr. Brennan's investigation revealed he'd been stealing pieces of the uniform for weeks. A shirt from the laundry, pants from a supply closet, a badge from a distracted worker's locker. I got home late that night to find my apartment door properly locked. Nothing seemingly out of place, but something felt wrong. My work badge wasn't on the kitchen counter where I always left it. I searched everywhere before checking my building's key fob records on the resident portal. Someone had used my spare fob to enter at 2:47 a.m. 3 nights ago while I was asleep. The next morning, my boss called me into his office. He'd received an email from my address at 4 a.m. claiming I was having another breakdown and needed extended leave. I hadn't sent it. My boss showed me the email on his screen. It detailed supposed symptoms I was experiencing, signed with my name. Mikey had used my work badge to access my office computer. Emma called during lunch, her voice tense. She asked if I knew why Mikey would be calling her about Alice's favorite flowers. My stomach dropped. She explained he'd called 2 weeks ago before his escape, asking detailed questions about what Alice would want for her birthday. Emma had thought it was part of his therapy and answered honestly: pink roses and baby's breath. I rushed to the bank to check our old joint account, the one I'd forgotten to close. The teller's expression told me everything. $3,000 withdrawn over the past month in small increments. I'd been so focused on his treatment that I hadn't monitored the account. She printed the withdrawal records, each one from different ATMs around town. Back at Mikey's apartment, I found receipts hidden in his closet. Hardware store purchases, rope, tarps, a shovel. Party supply store receipts for princess decorations, pink streamers, a child-sized tiara. The flower shop receipt showed a standing order for pink roses to be delivered to the cemetery every Tuesday. My hands trembled as I photographed each receipt. Dr. Brennan called an emergency meeting. 2 other patients had come forward with disturbing stories. Mikey had been recruiting them for weeks, telling them about his sister who was being held against her will. He'd promised them they'd be heroes if they helped rescue her. One patient, dealing with his own delusions, had almost believed him. Emma met me for coffee that evening. She suggested gently that maybe I was becoming too obsessed with Mikey's illness, that I needed to let the professionals handle it. This is one of those moments where you just have to laugh at the neighbor asking if everything's all right while Mikey's literally trying to force his brother into a princess costume. Like, lady, does this sound all right to you? I showed her the journal entries, the receipts, the security footage. Her expression shifted from concern to horror as she realized the depth of his planning. While organizing papers, I found an old text message Mikey had sent Alice 2 days before her accident. It read, "Don't worry about Mark. Big brothers always think they know best." Such an innocent message then. Now it felt like a dark preview of his current delusions. I stared at it until my eyes burned. My phone rang constantly over the next few days. Extended family members called with concern, not for me, but about Mikey. He'd been calling them from the hospital, claiming I wouldn't let him visit Alice's grave properly. My aunt said he'd sobbed on the phone about how I was keeping him from saying goodbye to his sister. She'd almost driven down to confront me before remembering Alice had been dead for over a year. My supervisor called me into another meeting. More emails had been sent from various IP addresses, all claiming I was exhibiting erratic behavior at work. The IT department traced them to public library computers and the hospital's visitor Wi-Fi. My supervisor had no choice but to place me on mandatory administrative leave pending a psychological evaluation. I met with Dr. Woods, the hospital psychiatrist assigned to Mikey's case. She dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand, insisting Mikey was stabilized and showing genuine remorse. When I pressed about his manipulation tactics, she grew defensive. Only later did a nurse quietly mention that Dr. Woods had lost her own daughter years ago. She saw grief, not danger. Evening visiting hours became my new routine. I would sit outside the secured unit, watching through the reinforced window as Mikey moved around the common area. One night, I watched him practice dance movements alone in the the corner, his arms positioned as if holding an invisible partner. The other patients gave him a wide berth. Maria, the night cleaning woman, found me in the hallway one evening. She pulled me aside, glancing nervously around. In broken English, she explained that Mikey had been paying her $20 each time to deliver packages to the cemetery. She thought she was helping a grieving brother. The packages had included a child-sized sleeping bag, battery-powered lanterns, and bottles of water. She'd left them by Alice's headstone as instructed. My aunt called the next morning, confused about Facebook posts. Mikey had somehow accessed social media and was posting in grief support groups about seeking justice for Alice. The posts claimed I had isolated her, controlled her, prevented her from living her dreams. Members of her church group were sharing the posts, offering prayers and support for Mikey's loss. The comment sections filled with outrage toward me. A pattern emerged as I reviewed everything. Mikey specifically targeted people who had lost daughters or sisters. Sarah Peen, Dr. Woods, Maria, all had experienced similar losses. He studied their social media, learned their stories, and used their grief as an entry point for manipulation. He appeared vulnerable and broken to them, triggering their protective instincts. Sarah Peen texted me late one night. She couldn't sleep, haunted by how easily she'd been fooled. She shared more details about their conversations. Mikey had told her I wouldn't let him say goodbye properly, that I'd banned him from the cemetery. He'd cried in her arms, calling her by her dead sister's name when she comforted him. The manipulation was so calculated it made me nauseous. I managed to get permission to record one conversation with Mikey. Sitting across from him in the visitor's room, I watched him cycle between lucidity and delusion. For a moment, his eyes cleared, and he looked directly at me. His voice was calm and measured as he said he knew exactly what I thought he was. Then, just as quickly, he slipped back into calling me Alice. The shift was seamless and terrifying. Emma started receiving strange messages on social media. Photos of her old Instagram posts had been edited to include Alice's face. The messages came from new accounts with variations of Alice's name. Each one claimed to be reaching out from the other side. Emma blocked each account, but new ones kept appearing. She finally deactivated her social media entirely. Mrs. T stopped by my apartment one evening with a casserole and troubling news. Mikey had been visiting her for months before his breakdown, always asking about that night, the night she'd called the police. He wanted to know every detail, what she'd heard, what I'd said, how I'd sounded. She thought he was processing trauma. Now she realized he'd been gathering information to refine his delusion. I opened the package of childhood videos that arrived at my apartment the following week. The return address was blank, but I recognized Mikey's handwriting. My hands shook as I inserted the first DVD. The footage showed Alice and Mikey at her 5th birthday party, laughing as she blew out candles. Normal enough, until I realized something was wrong. Every shot that should have included me had been edited. Where I'd been standing next to Alice, now there was empty space. My voice had been removed from the audio. Frame by frame, Mikey had erased me from our shared memories. The second video was worse. Christmas morning, 10 years ago. I remembered that day perfectly. I'd given Alice her first ballet shoes, but in this version, Mikey handed her the shoes. My face had been digitally replaced with his in every frame. The editing was crude but obsessive, hundreds of hours of work. A sticky note on the case read, "Fixed our memories," in Mikey's handwriting. I started recognizing Mikey's pattern more clearly. He wasn't randomly selecting his allies. He researched them first. Sarah Peen had posted about her sister's death anniversary just days before Mikey approached her. Dr. Woods had written an article about losing her daughter that Mikey had printed and annotated. Each woman he targeted had specific vulnerabilities he exploited with surgical precision. The facility nurse named Janet contacted me through Sarah Peen. She'd almost fallen for Mikey's manipulation too. He'd asked her to write a statement about my controlling behavior toward Alice, claiming he needed it for a grief support group. Janet had started writing it before another nurse warned her about Mikey's delusions. She showed me the half-finished letter. Mikey had coached her on specific phrases to use. Emma received a friend request from a profile using Alice's photo. The account had been created recently, filled with Alice's old pictures. Emma showed me the profile before declining the request. Every photo caption referenced missing her family, wanting to come home, feeling trapped. The posts were dated as if Alice was still alive, chronicling a false life she never lived. I took screenshots of everything before Mikey could delete them. The cloud storage became my evidence vault. Videos, receipts, social media posts, text messages. I organized them chronologically, building a timeline of Mikey's escalating behavior. The pattern was undeniable when laid out systematically. Police met with me after Emma filed a harassment report. They reviewed my documentation but explained that without direct threats of violence, this remained a mental health issue. Mikey hadn't technically broken any laws. The officer suggested I maintain distance and let the medical professionals handle it. I left the station feeling more alone than ever. Sarah Peen called me in a panic. Mikey had somehow gotten her daughter's school information and called asking about dance recital schedules. He'd told the secretary he was Alice's uncle, wanting to surprise her. Fortunately, the school had protocols about releasing student information, but the fact that he'd tried terrified both of us. I discovered Mikey had registered for multiple grief support groups, using Alice's death date as his loss. The facilitators didn't know Alice had been his sister, not his daughter. He'd been attending virtually from the hospital, telling elaborate stories about how I'd prevented him from saving her. Group members had been offering him support and validation for months. Travis, Mikey's college roommate, returned my calls after weeks of trying to reach him. He revealed that Mikey had shown similar behavior in college when their friend died in a skiing accident. Mikey had kept the friend's belongings, talked to his photos, even tried to take over his class schedule, but it hadn't escalated to this level. Travis had thought it was just an intense grief response. Dr. Brennan finally took my concerns seriously after reviewing my documentation. She committed to a more thorough evaluation and agreed that Mikey needed specialized care. Her change in perspective felt like a small victory, but I knew the battle was far from over. Insurance would only cover 2 more weeks without long-term placement approval. The timeline grew tighter when I learned about Mikey's therapy sessions with Dr. Patterson. For 8 sessions, Mikey had never once mentioned that Alice was dead. He spoke about her in present tense, describing their daily interactions, her upcoming events, her needs. Dr. Patterson had been treating him for caregiver stress, not knowing the person he cared for had been gone for over a year. During a supervised phone call, Mikey's questions turned dark. He asked why I'd let Alice drive that night, implying I was somehow responsible for her death. The accusation stung because I hadn't even been in the state when the accident happened. I was at a work conference 500 miles away, but in Mikey's revised history, I'd forced her to leave the house. Mikey made me an offer through Dr. Brennan. He would stop telling people I was controlling if I admitted to causing Alice's death. The bargain revealed how deeply his delusion ran. He needed someone to blame, and I'd become his target. I refused, knowing that feeding his fantasy would only make things worse. Dr. Woods began questioning her initial assessment after Mikey called her mom during a session. She'd been wearing a cardigan similar to one our mother used to wear, and something in his brain had made the connection. The slip shook her professional confidence. She started reviewing his case with fresh eyes, finally seeing the manipulation I'd been warning about. The cemetery groundskeeper reached out after Dr. Brennan contacted him. He'd been finding strange items at Alice's grave for weeks before Mikey's arrest. Fresh children's toys, unopened juice boxes, little notes written in crayon. He'd assumed grieving family members left them, but the timing matched Mikey's late-night visits, always between 2 and 4 a.m. when the cemetery was closed. By this point, only Dr. Patterson and 2 orderlies still believed Mikey's grief was simply misunderstood. Everyone else had witnessed his elaborate fantasies and manipulation tactics. The shift in professional opinion felt validating, but came too late to prevent months of damage to my reputation and relationships. I found Mikey's old tablet hidden in my apartment during a deep clean. He must have left it during his 2:47 a.m. visit. The device contained hours of recordings, Alice's voice spliced together from old videos to say new things. The most chilling was a 5-minute audio file where her voice said, "Mark is hurting me," over and over. The technical skill required made me realize Mikey had been planning this for longer than I'd imagined. Emma chose to stand by me despite her family's concerns. They thought I was attracting drama, that maybe I should distance myself from Mikey entirely. But Emma had seen enough evidence to understand that Mikey's delusions would follow me regardless. She helped me develop safety protocols, regular check-ins, code words, shared location tracking. Together, we created a security plan. Emma would know if I didn't check in every 4 hours. We established safe words for different scenarios. I gave her access to my cloud storage with all the evidence, just in case something happened to me. The precautions felt extreme but necessary given Mikey's escalating behavior. I made the difficult decision not to use Mikey's recordings against him in treatment meetings. As damaging as they were, I knew they'd only humiliate him and potentially worsen his condition. Instead, I focused on documenting patterns of behavior and working with professionals who understood the complexity of his delusions. During a family therapy session, Mikey accidentally revealed he was still planning to escape. He mentioned, "when I get to her," before catching himself and correcting to past tense. The slip confirmed what I'd suspected. His cooperation was an act. He was biding his time, learning the new facility's routines, just as he'd done before. Sarah Peen provided a written statement about Mikey's manipulation tactics. She detailed how he'd gained her trust, the specific stories he'd told, the ways he'd used her grief against her. Her honesty helped build the case for specialized treatment. Other staff members began coming forward with similar experiences. 2 orderlies requested transfers after Mikey tried to organize an Alice birthday party in the common room. He'd convinced other patients to help decorate, telling them about his sister who couldn't celebrate with them. When staff intervened, Mikey had broken down, accusing them of ruining Alice's special day. The scene disturbed everyone who witnessed it. Sarah Peen discovered that Mikey had been researching staff members' social media profiles from the hospital computer during recreation time. He'd compiled notes about their losses, their vulnerabilities, their schedules. The level of planning showed his delusions hadn't diminished. They'd simply gone underground. I connected with Travis to build a fuller picture of Mikey's history. We spent hours on video calls, piecing together patterns from college. Travis remembered other incidents, Mikey becoming overly overly attached to friends, creating elaborate fantasies about relationships that didn't exist. The death of their friend had triggered something deeper, but the seeds had always been there. When confronted with the mounting evidence during a treatment team meeting, Mikey finally admitted something chilling. He claimed Alice talked to him, that she visited him at night, that only he could hear her. The admission confirmed what the psychiatrists suspected. This went beyond grief into something requiring intensive intervention. Dr. Woods formally apologized for her initial dismissal of my concerns. She acknowledged that her own grief had clouded her professional judgment. She recommended a specialized facility that dealt specifically with delusional disorders and complicated grief. Her support carried weight with the insurance company. Mikey's treatment options narrowed to 2 facilities capable of handling his specific needs. Both required family consent and significant financial commitment. The deadline loomed as insurance coverage ticked down. I spent sleepless nights researching both facilities, reading reviews, calling references. Travis revealed the full extent of Mikey's previous fixations. In college, he'd shown possessive behavior toward several friends, though never to this extreme. He'd keep their borrowed items, show up uninvited to their family events, create elaborate stories about their friendships. Alice's death had weaponized these existing patterns into something far more dangerous. I worked with the treatment team to ensure Sarah Peen's daughter's school implemented additional security measures. The principal took the threat seriously after reviewing the documentation. They flagged Mikey's name and photo in their system, added security questions for anyone calling about students. The precautions felt necessary given his previous attempt. The hospital social worker joined forces with Dr. Brennan and 3 nurses to advocate for Mikey's placement in specialized care. Their united front helped push insurance toward approval. Having medical professionals validate my concerns after months of being dismissed felt like a crucial turning point. Mikey's attempts to contact Emma's sister failed when her family blocked all unknown numbers and set their social media to private. He'd been trying to build a network of Alice's friends, people who might help him rescue her. Each blocked attempt frustrated him more, leading to increased agitation in the facility. Father Rodriguez, the facility chaplain, saw through Mikey's performance during what was supposed to be confession. Instead of seeking forgiveness, Mikey had talked about resurrection, about bringing Alice back, about punishing those who kept them apart. The chaplain's report added religious delusion to Mikey's diagnostic picture. My supervisor called to apologize after IT confirmed the harassment emails came from the facility's IP address. The digital trail was clear. Mikey had been accessing computers during recreation time, sending messages designed to discredit me. My workplace agreed to support me through the situation, granting extended leave to handle Mikey's care. Sarah Peen learned from night shift staff that Mikey paced the halls every night, stopping at each window to look for Alice. He'd whisper to the darkness, having full conversations with someone who wasn't there. The behavior had been documented for weeks, but dismissed as harmless until the escape. The insurance deadline forced an urgent decision: state facility with basic care or private facility with specialized treatment and partial coverage. The financial burden would be significant, but Mikey needed more than warehouse-style institutionalization. I chose the specialized program, knowing it meant depleting my savings. During group therapy, Mikey's elaborate fantasy about Princess Alice disturbed other patients enough that several requested transfers to different groups. He described in detail how Alice was being held in a tower, how only he could save her, how everyone else was under an evil spell. The fairy tale delusion revealed how deeply he'd retreated from reality. I faced a painful realization while touring facilities. Accepting Mikey's illness meant accepting that I'd lost both siblings the night of Alice's accident. The brother I knew had disappeared into his delusions, replaced by someone who saw me as an enemy. Grief hit me in waves as I filled out admission paperwork. Mikey discovered I was touring facilities and began texting me repeatedly from smuggled phones. The messages called me a traitor, accused me of abandoning Alice, threatened to never forgive me. I blocked each number without responding, but they kept coming from new ones. The harassment showed his desperation as treatment became inevitable. Support group members began distancing themselves from Mikey after he gave a speech about Alice's resurrection. He described in detail how she would return, how those who truly loved her would be rewarded, how doubters would be punished. The religious overtones disturbed even those dealing with their own grief. Group facilitators finally realized they'd been enabling his delusions. The treatment team unanimously recommended specialized placement after reviewing Mikey's complete history. The pattern was undeniable: escalating delusions, sophisticated manipulation, potential for violence. Their professional consensus helped secure insurance approval for 6 months of intensive treatment. Relief washed over me when Riverside Psychiatric Institute accepted Mikey's case. The facility specialized in delusional disorders and had experience with complicated grief. Their program included medication management, intensive therapy, and gradual reality orientation. For the first time in months, I felt hope. Mikey's transport to Riverside revealed his desperation. He tried convincing the transport team that I was impersonating a doctor, that this was an elaborate kidnapping. The team had been thoroughly briefed and maintained professional boundaries, despite his increasingly frantic claims. They'd seen this behavior before. The transport team's notes described Mikey's attempts to manipulate them during the drive. He'd cycled through different approaches: tears, anger, bargaining, even trying to convince them that Alice was waiting at the hospital. Their professional detachment frustrated him into eventual silence. As Mikey's evaluation at Riverside began, he displayed an unsettling calm. Too calm. Staff noted he was cooperating fully, taking medication without complaint, participating in activities, but I recognized this pattern. He was studying them, learning their routines, planning his next move. The calm felt like a storm gathering strength. I began rebuilding relationships with extended family members who finally understood the situation. My aunt apologized for doubting me, admitting she'd been fooled by Mikey's convincing performance. Other relatives shared similar stories of manipulation. The family started to grasp the depth of Mikey's illness. Mrs. T organized neighborhood support after learning the full story. She shared her security footage with other neighbors, warning them about potential manipulation. The community that had once viewed me with suspicion now offered help and understanding. Their support meant more than they knew. I presented Mikey's complete history to the Riverside treatment team, with Travis joining by video call. Together, we painted a picture of long-standing patterns that predated Alice's death. The team appreciated the context, adjusting their treatment approach based on this deeper understanding. Dr. Kumar, Riverside's lead psychiatrist, identified specific markers of delusional disorder with complicated grief. She explained how Mikey's brain had created an alternate reality to cope with unbearable loss. The clinical explanation helped me understand this wasn't a choice. His mind had fractured under the weight of trauma. Mikey's recorded therapy sessions at Riverside revealed the elaborate internal world he'd constructed. Dr. Kumar played the recordings for me during a treatment planning meeting. In his mind, Alice lived in a parallel dimension, accessible only through specific rituals. He described her daily routines there, the conversations they had, the meals they shared. The detail was staggering. He'd created an entire life for her, complete with friends, hobbies, and adventures that never happened. The treatment notes validated every incident I'd documented over the past 2 years. Each manipulation tactic, each escalation, each delusional episode matched the patterns Dr. Kumar had seen in similar cases. The validation felt hollow, though. Being right meant accepting how sick my brother truly was. A court-appointed advocate reviewed Mikey's case file, interviewing staff members and reviewing the extensive documentation. Her recommendation came swiftly: extended involuntary commitment with regular reassessments. The legal framework would ensure Mikey couldn't simply charm his way out again. Riverside's treatment team, my extended family members who'd finally understood, and the medical professionals all agreed on a 6-month minimum program. The consensus felt like progress, but I knew 6 months was just the beginning. Recovery from delusions this deep could take years, if it happened at all. Then Mikey found a new proxy. Another patient at Riverside, dealing with his own reality distortions, began calling my workplace repeatedly. He claimed to be Alice's friend with an urgent message about her safety. My employer's patience wore thin as the calls disrupted business operations. The receptionist started screening all calls, but they kept coming from different numbers. My boss pulled me into his office again. The company had been supportive, but the harassment was affecting other employees now. He mentioned the possibility of a restraining order against the facility if the calls didn't stop. I understood his position, but felt trapped between protecting my job and ensuring Mikey got treatment. That evening, I finally received an email from my parents. Not the supportive message I'd hoped for, but a terse accusation. They blamed me for not managing Mikey better, for letting his grief spiral out of control. They'd been gone for over a year, refusing to engage with his illness, but somehow this was my failure. The unfairness of it burned. The placement hearing arrived faster than expected. Emma had a work crisis she couldn't avoid, a system failure that required her immediate attention. I sat alone in the conference room at Riverside, presenting Mikey's case to the review board. My voice stayed steady as I detailed the manipulation, the escapes, the danger he posed to himself and others. During a break, I made a decision that had been building for weeks. I would pursue legal guardianship of Mikey. Our parents had abdicated their responsibility, and someone needed to make medical decisions for him. The process would be complicated, expensive, and almost certainly contested by our parents if they found out. Word of my guardianship plans reached Mikey through the facility grapevine. His reaction was immediate and violent. He threw a chair during group therapy, screaming about betrayal and imprisonment. It took 3 orderlies to restrain him. The medication adjustment that followed left him sedated for days, but the medical team assured me it was necessary for everyone's safety. My phone rang at dawn 3 days later. The facility had contacted our parents as emergency contacts after Mikey's outburst. They were driving down, demanding his immediate release to their custody. They hadn't seen him in over a year, hadn't witnessed his delusions, but were convinced they could pray his illness away. The family meeting that afternoon erupted within minutes. I spread 2 years of documentation across the conference table, while our parents insisted we just needed to reconcile as brothers. Mom kept saying boys will be boys, that grief made people do strange things. Dad suggested I was being dramatic. dramatic, that Mikey just needed to come home and rest. Then Mikey revealed something that shattered their denial. He'd been calling Alice's old cell phone number every night. Our parents had kept paying the bill, unable to let go of that last connection. Mikey described the voicemails he left, detailed conversations with Alice about her life in the other dimension. Mom's face went white as she realized she'd been enabling his delusions. Dr. Kumar intervened when Dad suggested prayer therapy and herbal remedies. She explained the neurological basis of Mikey's condition, the structural changes grief and psychosis had created in his brain. Her professional authority carried weight even with my skeptical parents. She made it clear that without proper treatment, Mikey would likely attempt another grave excavation, or worse. I faced a choice: fight my parents in court for guardianship, likely destroying what remained of our family, or find a compromise that ensured Mikey's treatment. The legal battle would be expensive, time-consuming, and traumatic for everyone, but Mikey needed consistent, long-term care that our parents' denial might interrupt. After hours of negotiation, we reached an agreement. Our parents could visit Mikey under supervision if they attended family therapy sessions and supported the treatment plan. They would share the financial burden of his care, which eased my depleted savings. Most importantly, they wouldn't interfere with medical decisions. The first supervised visit tested everyone's resolve. Mikey had prepared an elaborate birthday party for Alice in the common room, complete with a cake he'd convinced another patient to help him make. When staff tried to redirect him, he melted down completely, accusing our parents of missing Alice's special day. Mom sobbed as she watched her son sing happy birthday to an empty chair. Mikey's attempt to manipulate our parents followed his established pattern. He called Mom by Alice's name, begged her to take him home so they could be together. The manipulation might have worked a year ago, but watching him in full delusion broke through their denial. Dad had to leave the room when Mikey described how our parents had neglected Alice, projecting his own guilt onto them. The crack in their denial widened during family therapy. Mikey accused them of abandoning Alice, of loving me more, of causing her death through their favoritism. None of it was true. Our parents had loved all three of us equally, but Mikey's fractured mind needed someone to blame, and he'd expanded his target list beyond just me. With our parents finally accepting the reality of Mikey's illness, we secured funding for his extended treatment. Their insurance, combined with mine, would cover a full year at Riverside, with options for continued care if needed. The financial relief was significant, but more important was having family unity in supporting Mikey's treatment. Something shifted in Mikey after our parents committed to family therapy. He began cooperating with medication trials, though he still insisted Alice visited him at night. The new antipsychotic reduced his agitation and made him more receptive to reality orientation exercises. Progress was slow, measured in tiny increments, but it was progress. I spent a weekend going through Alice's belongings in storage. Emma helped me sort through clothes, books, and keepsakes. We donated most items to charity, keeping only a few meaningful pieces. The process felt like another goodbye, but a necessary one. Holding on to her physical possessions wouldn't bring her back, and Mikey's fixation on her belongings had fueled his delusions. 3 months into the new treatment protocol, during a family session, Mikey said something that stopped everyone cold. He looked at the empty chair where he usually placed Alice's imaginary presence and whispered that she wasn't coming. When Dr. Kumar gently asked what he meant, Mikey's eyes filled with tears. He said Alice was gone, had been gone since the accident. It was the first time he'd acknowledged her death as real. The breakthrough didn't last. By the next session, Mikey was back to describing Alice's parallel world, but that moment of clarity gave us hope. Dr. Kumar explained that recovery from delusions wasn't linear. There would be setbacks, returns to fantasy, moments of confusion, but acknowledgement, even brief, meant the medication and therapy were creating cracks in his alternate reality. I established a routine of weekly visits, always during structured activity times. Boundaries were essential. No discussing Alice's whereabouts, no feeding into delusions, no bringing items he might incorporate into fantasies. Some visits went well, with Mikey seeming almost like his old self. Others ended with him accusing me of hiding Alice or demanding I admit to crimes I hadn't committed. 1 year later, I stood at Alice's grave with Emma, our parents, and Mikey. He was on a day pass, heavily medicated but stable. The cemetery looked different in daylight than during his midnight excavation attempt. Mikey placed fresh flowers on the headstone, his hands shaking slightly from medication side effects. He looked at the grave for a long moment, then said the words we'd waited so long to hear. He missed his sister Lala, not the elaborate fantasy he'd created, but the real girl who died on a highway 2 years ago. Our family was broken, would always be broken, but we were learning to tend our wounds with professional help, proper boundaries, and the understanding that some grief is too large for the human mind to hold. I'd fought for both my siblings in different ways. One I couldn't save, one I could only help contain. Standing there together, damaged but present, felt like the only resolution our story could have. Thanks for reading this story with me. I hope you have a wonderful day.